Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our message for Sunday, October 2nd of 2022. A couple weeks ago, Queen Elizabeth passed away, and whether you watched it live or on the replays, you could actually see the pain and the anguish in the people's faces. Their sense of grief was absolutely palatable. So no matter whether you had ties to that country or not, her passing left a huge hole in people's hearts. And I think everyone can relate to that in some way or another. We all have lost someone through death. The closer they were to us, the more the grief we have felt. For some, they have felt grief over the passing itself. They were real clear with their relationship with the other person. But for others, the grief was for the things that could now not be said, and the sorrow for not having said that which they wanted to and didn't have the courage to do while the person was alive. For others, especially with the loss of a child, the grief can be for the life the child could have had if they had not passed. Then there are other types of grief. The grief of leaving a job you loved and now it was time to retire, or they had to let you go for some reason or another. The grief from having to move away and leave friends behind. The grief of a loss of a friendship through some misunderstanding. The grief that comes from a breakup with a person, whether it be by divorce or just the person leaving. The grief from the loss of a pet that was special to you. Even the grief we feel when we see events on the news and it moves us in some way. There are so many, many different types of grief. But what is grief? Matt Kahn says that grief is our growing relationship with change. It's how our psyche adjusts to loss of some sort. The incredible thing about grief is that there's two versions of it. There's how we experience it through our egos and how our soul experiences it. When we welcome grief, we start to understand that the things that causes human nature to avoid, to live in denial, instead of facing what is calling us inward to face. No matter where we are in grief, it's okay. It's okay to be where we're at, no matter where that is, to feel what we feel. And definitely it's okay to allow grief to be felt. Our human journey is one of transformation, constant, ever-growing expansion. And the primary shift that occurs each lifetime is some degree of the evolution of our consciousness, where we are experiencing a transition from identifying with object consciousness and returning to the identity of our essence. Object consciousness is when we think that the characters we are playing out while inhabiting the body is who we actually are. The characters we portray through these bodies is the experience we are having. But who we are has existed beyond this mortal body that deals with birth and death. Who we are existed far before we were birthed into the family that you were raised in. Who we are is set prior to anything encompassing time. And in every lifetime, the soul takes a certain journey to advance its consciousness further out of object consciousness and to the identity of its true consciousness. The reason it's important to state this in terms of welcoming grief is because from our physical experiences, it's so instinctive for us to relate as object of this body. If there is some sort of change, or if it involves a loss, or even the death of the person you're relating to, The ego interprets this journey from object essence loss. So, from the human perspective, grief is a suffering we endure when relationships don't seem to continue in the level of essence that we can see. The truth is, we all will glimpse another higher realm in our own way when we graduate out of the earth plane and we return to the dimension of our true essence. And when that happens, we realize that all our connections remain. Our egos cannot understand what the ego can't understand, which is why you're integrating your ego and awakening the light of your soul. Just because relationships change form or change shape or change dimensions doesn't mean that relationships perish. So even if you can't connect with your loved ones as when they were in body, they are still here as closely connected to you as your very breath. What actually assists us in waking up out of the limitations of our own ego is daring to heal our grief by continuing the relationships with those who have passed, even if we don't have the ability to connect through our human senses as we did before. Someone we have known may have left this plane of existence, but that doesn't stop the relationship you have with that person. They exist in a different plane, but are still walking with us, cheering us on. The more we open up our psychic senses, the more the relationships continue, even if under different terms. There's theories out there that say that every time a moment of grief arises, it's actually a loved one trying to tap you on the shoulder, trying to reach out to remind you that they're still walking with you, like one of your angels, like a guardian angel. So if we can begin to perceive these moments of grief as the person actually being with us, trying to communicate with us, then we can further our connection with them and with the other side in a very much deeper way. All sorts of change is inevitable on this earth plane. As each of us become more detached in our ability to experience life and death as set energies, the more we start having conscious experiences of death being only the death of one stage of connection and simultaneously the birthing of another stage of connection with the person who has left. Your ability to stay connected with those who have passed that might exist in different dimensional spaces is actually what forces us to take the journey a little deeper so that you can activate your psychic senses more and more. The more you awaken, the more the notion of death disappears, and death becomes just death of the body and not the person itself. Yet the grief for a person who has passed from this life to the next is only one type of grief. As Matt has stated, grief is our growing relationship with change. It's how our psyche adjusts to loss. So, have you grieved through a divorce or a separation from someone? And how many of you have lost a special pet? How many of you have cried over the loss of a home, moving, or the many other things that have gone on in life that we're attached to? As we grow in our awareness, we more fully understand that this earth plane of existence is here for our learning, our schooling, our growth. And when we leave here, we go back to our true home where we are one with everyone from this life. And it gives us a greater sense of disconnection from all the physical things around us. We begin to understand that all things around us are temporary, nothing is permanent. Everything is in transition. People will come and go out of our lives. They are only in our lives for the time that they're here, but they're here for our growth. They're here to teach us something, to help us to grow in some way. And maybe their leaving is to teach us something also. When we can begin to feel the grief over anything and welcome that grief in, we are then able to transmute that grief into a greater sense of love than we may have felt before. Love is the greatest power on this earth. When we can begin to feel the grief and welcome it, knowing that the welcoming is the first part in transmuting it, we truly begin the process of moving out of our connection to this dimension of being and begin to move greater and greater into the dimension where all resides in love. You know, they say that some people are in our lives for a moment, an hour, a season, that there is always something, some reason for their being here. And as we grow in our awareness of life and we become more and more aware of the dimensions of life past this, we find ourselves less and less in the grieving stage. Because as we open up, we realize that everything going on in our lives is for our own personal growth. But the bottom line of that growth is to teach us to accept all things so that we resist nothing. And in that non-resistance, we are in the full flow of the love of Source to come in us, as us, and through us for a blessing to this world. In the book, The Way of Mastery, Part 3, The Way of Knowing, Jeshua ben Joseph states, love is the most critical of things. The only way to teach love is to be the love under all circumstances. One is only awakened when one allows all things, trusts all things, and embraces all things, which is the same as feels all things. For in that very moment, the very thing arising is transcended because it is not obstructed or resisted. And what is not obstructed or resisted is embraced and consumed in the spaciousness of love. You have within yourself then all power under heaven and earth to transmute the body itself from a contraction of fear to a spaciousness that reflects the reality of God's love. For the body mind that emerged first from fear can be reopened so the energy of truth flows through it, so that nothing arises in your experience in the emotional field that obstructs the remembrance of love. The emotional field, the only place that you can experience anything. All the rest are merely thoughts about things. The gap between a thought about things and the full nature of experiencing things is exactly the same gap that exists between the illusion we live in and living in heaven. It's for this reason that no idea of God is the same as God. No concept about love is the same as love. No philosophy about enlightenment is the same as enlightened. No unobstructed feeling embraces all that arises and passes away. Unobstructed means without judgment. Even that which arises as fear or anger should never be judged or obstructed. That which arises as sadness or joy, that which arises as the passion of the body, all things must be open to and embraced, or the beingness of your soul has not yet transcended the world. Love is the ability to be fully present with what is, devouring it like a child devours candy, feeling it, experiencing it, and yet not caught into it. Understanding that all is a part of your growth and your development into a higher spiritual realm makes us and helps us to grow. Jeshua then asks us to ask ourselves some questions. And these questions are extremely important so that we can truly go within and fully be the person who welcomes not only grief, but all emotions. Where in my life have I reframed love? whereof I chosen behavioral patterns and decisions and choices with a smile on my face, while all the time attempting to control and manipulate the world in order to keep me safe from fully facing my own insecurities. Whereof I demanded that the world show up in a certain way so that I can pretend to have peace and pretend to be happy and loving. He goes on to state that anyone can be happy being held by 20 friends who say they love you, but only the enlightened can be happy when those 20 friends have chosen to crucify you. He states that it's in our darkest moments, it's in the crumbling of the structures you have made, that you are best given the opportunity to realize the great power within you to teach only love. Only my decision to surrender to the world, to transcend the world, to abide as empty in the world, and only my decision to teach only love and awaken me to the invulnerability beyond the vulnerability of all created things. He states that the one who abides in an unobstructed feeling nature flows with that which comes from the depth of a perfectly still heart and mind, and dances while knowing stillness. For the body mind that others see is no longer inhabited by the contraction of the ego. The enlightened cannot be understood. They can only be appreciated by the enlightened. And he asks us, who then will you choose to be this day? One who walks in the ordinary world, or one who walks in heaven side by side with their creator? Will you walk as one who in perfect innocence merely loves and laughs and chuckles when in great illusion of the drama of this world? You are love and nothing else. When you can trust all things, when you can allow all things, when you can welcome all things without restriction, then and only then can you truly choose love unconditionally. He states that you must come in your own Christ nature to see that in perfect innocence there is not anything else to do but love. To love without limits, to love without fear, to love by extending perfect freedom to all of creation to be and do what it wants to be and do. Then and only then can you know that nothing can betray you, nothing can hurt you, and nothing can bring anything to you or take it away. You have the infinite and perfect freedom to love. And he states, in that decision, you know your creator and can quite simply say, I and my Father are one. Don't be afraid of grieving, no matter what type of grief you're feeling. We are here on this earth to feel the emotions of everything that's going on around us. To get to that step beyond the grief of what we're opening up to. And this step to understanding of a greater reality than what our human eyes can see, our human ears can hear, our human hands can touch. As Joshua stated, all you are is love. Thank you for being with us today, and have an absolutely beautiful week. God bless each and every one.